Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I will discuss Philip K. Dick's book The Man in the High Castle. But before I start, allow me a personal word. I would like to thank all of you for staying subscribed through my long absence. I used the time to properly grieve the passing of my dog Linus, and I thank each and everyone for your condolences as well. Now, let's turn to today's video. We will start with the book review. I will then follow up with some food for thought, and at the very end of the video you'll get to hear from one of the subscribers about their take on reading PKD in general. Let's get into it. Philip K. Dick began writing The Man in the High Castle in 1961 during the height of the Cold War. The world was polarized between two superpowers, and anxieties about communism, nuclear war, and cultural imperialism were widespread. The novel's premise, that Germany and Japan won the World War, mirrors the actual Cold War division, to Europe being divided between the US and the USSR at the time. The world the novel describes looks like this. Nazi Germany controls most of Europe. Africa has reportedly been subjected to genocide by the Nazis and largely depopulated. The Mediterranean Sea has been drained. The Nazis also control eastern US from the east coast to the Rocky Mountains, and South America, inferred to be under Nazi influence. Italy is mentioned but not emphasized. It seems to have become a junior partner or faded into the background. The Japanese Empire controls the west coast of the US from California, Oregon, Washington, collectively known as the PSA, parts of East and Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands. With regards to space exploration, the Nazis have already colonized Mars, symbolizing their technological might and imperial ideology taken to cosmic scale. Also, there is deep distrust and rivalry between Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, suggesting an unstable peace that could break at any moment. Dick's characters live in Japanese-controlled California under a white puppet state, somewhat like East Germany, and Japanese culture has come to suffuse society. The American characters feel inferior to the Japanese occupiers. They talk with Japanese accents and try to find their place in Asian-dominated culture. After completing the manuscript, Dick submitted the novel to Putnam, and it was published in 1962. It was his first major critical success and won the 1963 Hugo Award for Best Novel, bringing him literary recognition beyond the science fiction genre. Interestingly, despite the book's success, Dick originally planned a sequel expanding the exploration of alternate realities and the Nazi space program. However, he ultimately abandoned it, saying that the mental toll of writing in the Nazi-dominated world was too great. He later said, "I had to stop. I just couldn't stand it. I had to go back to writing something where there was some kind of hope." Philip K. Dick portrays life under a fascist regime with chilling subtlety and psychological depth. He avoids overt spectacle in favor of insidious normalization. Rather than dramatizing violence or authoritarian rituals, he focuses on the quiet compromises, the internalized hierarchies, and moral disorientation that characterize everyday life in a totalitarian order. Through characters like Frank Frink, who hides his Jewish identity under threat of extermination, and Robert Childen, who navigates racial humiliation while selling American artifacts to Japanese elites, Dick illustrates how fascism permeates not just institutions, but consciousness itself. The pervasive atmosphere of fear, cultural inferiority, and ethical paralysis reveals a society where oppression is routinized and resistance is rare, often ambiguous. By embedding these tensions in mundane transactions and personal dilemmas, Dick exposes the banality of totalitarianism, not as a spectacle, but as a system that erodes autonomy and reality from within. A question that the novel warrants, and one that is regaining relevance in the current geopolitical climate, is how do you know if you're living in a fascist regime? Living in a fascist regime often feels deceptively normal because fascism thrives on the erosion of norms rather than their abrupt collapse. Some common indicators drawn from historical cases, for example Mussolini's Italy, Nazi Germany, or Francoist Spain, and scholarly frameworks include the following criteria: a centralized authoritarian leadership with unchecked power, suppression of dissent, media control, political purges, attacks on intellectuals, and fear-based censorship, nationalist ideology, often racialized or ethnocentric, portraying the nation as pure and under existential threat, militarization of society, and glorification of violence or war as a unifying and purifying force, scapegoating of minorities or outgroups as enemies of the nation, cult of personality around a leader who embodies the nation's destiny, disdain for democratic institutions, rule of law, and pluralism. Fascism is best recognized not only in symbols and slogans, but in structural shifts. When institutions erode, fear governs public life, and violence becomes a political tool. Historical fascism offers a template, but its contemporary echoes may be more hubridized, subtle, or cloaked in democratic rhetoric. With the regime's ideological foundations explored, let's now shift to the human experience within this world. Rather than a central plotline, the novel weaves together several loosely connected subplots. There is a variety of characters, and it is, as is often the case with Piketty's books, hard to keep track of them. To give you a flavor of what you'll be dealing with, let's brush over the most important characters real quick. There's a Japanese businessman called Nobusuke Tagomi, a trade official in San Francisco navigating high-stakes diplomatic tensions between Japan and Nazi Germany. Then there's Frank Frink, a secretly Jewish and recently fired skilled worker and hoping to make a living selling handcrafted jewelry while trying to stay hidden from the fascist regime. There's a white American antiques dealer called Robert Childen, who sells Americana to wealthy Japanese clients and wrestles with his cultural inferiority complex. Then there's an Italian truck driver turned assassin, Joe Cindanella, who secretly is a Nazi agent. Lastly, we have Juliana Frink, Frank's ex-wife, living in the neutral Rocky Mountain states. She gets involved with Joe and ends up killing him. And there's also a book within the book, a novel that a lot of the characters in the book read. It's called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. It's a banned novel that imagines an alternate reality within the novel where the Allies won the war, written by a man called Hawthorne Abendsen. He supposedly lives in a heavily guarded fortress, the High Castle, hence the name of this novel. The theme of historicity, what makes something truly historical, is embodied in the subplot concerning antiques dealer Robert Children. He traffics in Americana, sought after by Japanese elites who value these artifacts as emblems of a defeated culture. But many of the antiques are forgeries, and Children struggles with the idea of authenticity, both in objects and in identity. By extension, history too might not merely be a neutral recounting of facts, but an emplotment, a narrative construction. Dick makes this explicit. If the historical narrative can be revised or forged, what then anchors meaning? Does history derive its weight from facts or from the belief that it is authentic? The forged Colt 44 and the genuine Mickey Mouse watch both testify to the fictionality of history under conditions of commodification and ideological manipulation. Dick did not miss the opportunity to have a bit of fun in the book. Now and again he distorts historical facts or he ridicules historical figures. He doesn't even stop at Adolf Hitler. Old Adolf, supposed to be in a sanatorium somewhere, living out his life of senile paresis, syphilis of the brain dating back to his poor days as a bum in Vienna. Long black coat, dirty underwear, flop houses. Obviously, it was God's sardonic vengeance right out of some silent movie. That awful man struck down by an internal filth, the historic plague for man's wickedness. Perhaps the most unsettling dimension of The Man in the High Castle is its moral ambiguity. In Dick's fictional world, Nazi Germany has not only defeated its enemies, but has also implemented large-scale genocidal policies and extended its reach into space. There are some anti-Semitic bits in the book to exemplifying normalized evil. Robert said, if Germany and Japan had lost the war, the Jews would be running the world today, through Moscow and Wall Street. We live in a society of law and order, where Jews can't pull their subtleties on the innocent. We're protected. Without law, I'd be at their mercy. He could have convinced me of anything. It's a form of hypnosis. They can control an entire society. Such statements reflect characters shaped by their environment and not the author's own views. And yet within the Axis-dominated United States in the book, some characters accommodate or even admire their new overlords. The novel poses a difficult question. In a world where evil is normalized, how do individuals retain moral clarity? This ethical tension aligns with Hannah Arendt's analysis of the banality of evil. Many characters are complicit in the Axis regime, not through active malice, but through bureaucratic inertia or pragmatic compromise. Juliana Frink's eventual decision to protect Hawthorne Abendsen, the author of the book The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, marks a turning point where moral agency reasserts itself, not through ideology, but through a visceral commitment to human dignity and truth. One of the most unique and important influences on the book's genesis was Dick's use of the I Ching, or Book of Changes, which is an ancient Chinese divination text. Dick consulted the I Ching throughout the writing of the novel. He used it to guide narrative decisions, determine plot developments, and even resolve questions of character action and symbolic meaning. Doing so, Dick problematizes the very concept of historical rightness. Therefore, the I Ching is the book's central metafictional device. There are 12 I Ching readings in the book that give the subplots direction. Its prominence in the novel suggests that events unfold according to chance, fate, or Taoist balance. The I Ching's answers are cryptic, its wisdom ambivalent, and yet the characters in Dick's novel trust it more than they do political systems or historical narratives. In a final twist of self-referentiality, Dick suggests that the fictional world of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy may be more real than the world of The Man in the High Castle itself. This is in the last chapter when Juliana asks the I Ching what the readers of the book The Grasshopper Lies Heavy are meant to learn, which of course refers the same question back to us, the readers of The Man in the High Castle. Well, the answer the oracle gives is hexagram 61, Chang Fu, which stands for inner truth. This is followed by a dialogue between Juliana and the author of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, clarifying what the oracle points to. That the book is true, that it is not the Germans and the Japanese that won World War II, despite everybody believing in it. At least that is my interpretation. At an earlier point, Dick has the character of Juliana reflect on the book, and her conclusion is interesting. She says to herself, he, meaning the author of The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, he told us about our own world. This is what's around us now. Meaning that when the characters are confronted with a mirror reality by reading The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, they get to reflect on their own reality, much like us, the readers of The Man in the High Castle, get to reflect on ours. Both books function as mirrors, mirrors of history, of reality, of ourselves in both. And here we return to one of Philip K. Dick's recurring themes that span most of his work, the question of what reality is. In one of his speeches, Dick gave the answer directly. Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away. The layered metafiction in the novel raises questions not only about which history is true, but also whether truth itself is a fiction or belief structure, or something deeper. The Man in the High Castle is not merely an exercise in alternate history, it is a philosophical exploration of the construction of history and the fragility of moral order. Through its layered narratives and self-reflexive structure, Dick forces the reader to confront an unsettling possibility, that the real is not given but made, and that in a world of competing fictions, authenticity and truth must be arduously, even perilously chosen. In that context, the context of competing fictions, I would like to offer you a series of factoids that have been and are still being reported, not in the mainstream media mostly, some of which are generally accepted by now and some of which stay contested. They contain a bunch of keywords that you can jot down for yourselves and investigate further on your own time if you'd like to do and go down these rabbit holes. Taken together, these factoids suggest that the history that we are being fed through mainstream institutions is at best incomplete. It also suggests that there might well be a breakaway civilization utilizing physics that has been cordoned off from mainstream science somewhere back in the 40s. This, of course, would render Dick's book Prophecy a wake-up call for those who dare to be initiated. Dick certainly alludes to such alternative history in the text itself when he has one of the characters lament, for instance. If those Nazis can fly back and forth between here and Mars, why can't they get television going? With this book, PKD pushes our nose into the possibility that, contrary to official history, Nazi scientists continued their research in the US after World War II. They infiltrated intelligence services and helped whole sections of science, physics in particular, to go black and create a parallel reality for some kind of elite who since then operates with impunity, rendering official geopolitics mere child's play. In the description box below you will find some references for YouTube channels that have respective materials to research in case you're interested in that topic. We will end today's episode with the voice of a subscriber, of Brent, who answered my call for entries from you, my viewers, answering a set of 4 questions about the experience of reading Philip K. Dick's books. Thank you, Brent, for participating. If any of you would like to submit a short statement as well, please check out this post in the community tab and follow the instructions there. Now, here's Brent's take, and I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Brent from Geberge in South Africa. My first PKD novel was way back when I was a kid. It was Eye in the Sky. I think it's Eye in the Sky. I think that's the title. And that made me think about the subjectivity of the realities we're in, to use Timothy Leary's and Robert Anton Wilson's concept, the different reality tunnels we live in. If PKD were writing today, I think he'd be doing pretty much the same sort of stuff. I mean, we're kind of living in a very Philip K. Dick-like world, AI, simulation theories, all of that. So I don't think it would change too much. I think he'd be interested in the ideas of the idea of the singularity, stuff like that. So yeah, I haven't had any other worldly experiences in connection with Philip K. Dick or his writing. Sadly, I've had some weird stuff happen that could be some sort of just glitch in my brain. Things like ghosts and even demonic entities in it, but nothing really related to Philip K. Dick. If I had one question for PKD, it would be, oddly enough, because I've been wrestling with radical theology lately, the question would be, did he ever make up his mind about who or what Jesus Christ was. Thanks a lot. Bye.